Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Central European Day of Energy, another part after the lunch break. Welcome back. Now we are moving to the second panel of our conference, the one devoted to the role of gaseous fuels in securing energy system resilience. I'm passing the floor to Andrei Barku, our moderator.
Thank you very much, Jakob, and thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to participate in this very interesting and timely event, and also having such a distinguished panel. So my first job is to introduce the panel, which may test my linguistic abilities. So if I go wrong, don't blame me. But first, that is easy. Jörg Zachman, who's a senior fellow at Bruegel. Good to see you again, Jörg. It's been a while. The second participant is Jakub Psikorovic, who is at the Gas System SA, followed by Nenuma Zbigniew, the CEO of Amber Grid, Ralf Wesel, Secretary General Eugene and EU Turbines, and Dimowir Fliss, Project Manager on Hydrogen at Agora Energiewende. So thank you very much all for participating today. This is a timely moment. We are entering into a winter, and there's a lot of discussion about the resilience of the energy systems in Europe. We are also in the middle of somewhat of the disturbance in terms of prices, but really, if you read the Financial Times, if you read other press, there's a lot of talk about the resilience of the energy system this coming winter. So obviously that is making a lot of people nervous. But this is not only about this winter. This is about, in general, this is about the long term, because energy is not a short-term project. Energy is what drives our economy, what drives our lives. So I'm inviting the panelists in the order that I mentioned. So first of all, I'd like to ask Jörg Zachman, what is your view? I think you've been an observer on the flows from Eastern Europe coming into the EU. Your views or how these flows are contributing or detracting from the energy resilience in Europe, and any other thoughts that you may have. So Jörg, you have the floor.
Yes, thanks a lot, Andrei. And yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't be in Brussels. It would have been great to sit together with you and discuss also after the event. Now, I would like to make 2 points. Essentially, one on the short-term situation and one a bit on the longer term. On the short-term situation, as you mentioned, Andrei, we have been tracking it at Bruegel, where we have a little data interactive website. The gas flows coming in from all different input sources, including LNG, and the storage levels. And yeah, as you all know, we can very well show that this is probably the most tight situation ever experienced in the gas market, and this is most likely due to a mix of a tight global energy market, but also then a dominant supplier essentially using its position to extract rents and concessions. So we see Gazprom storages being particularly empty. We're seeing gas flows from Russia through different pipeline systems being affected in very different ways, and some playing between those pipeline systems. So it seems relatively plausible to assume that there is some strategic purpose here, and if it is only to kind of have higher long-term contract prices, which are indexed to the short-term spot markets. Now, what should Europe do? That's in the short term extremely difficult because having high prices reduces demand, and I think that's important in this situation. Having high prices attracts LNG, and we are seeing increasing LNG inflows, even though prices in other parts of the world are also high. And therefore, I think playing on the wholesale market is certainly the wrong signal. And just allowing Russia to get Nord Stream over the finishing line will most likely also not be a sensible solution, because it will in the long term only allow then Gazprom to use more flexibly the different flow options that they have to discriminate between European countries whom they're sending the flows, and potentially pushing for discriminatory long-term contracts with different consumers. So I would rather not go down this road. Now, that's still the short term, because in the long term we want to decarbonize, and then the role of gaseous flows in energy system resilience might change quite dramatically. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity today, because we just published 2 weeks ago a long report for the European Parliament on decarbonization of energy, in which we are discussing quite extensively hydrogen and molecules, and so the role of them for decarbonization. And the one big conclusion that most people share now is that electricity's role in the energy mix will increase dramatically, but there are 2 remaining big questions, which are seasonal flexibility and hard to abate sectors. And for both of them, we still have big question marks and different options. So for the flexibility need, we might have nuclear, which doesn't have production seasonality as much as renewables. We might have storage. We might have backup plants. For those backup plants, we might need more power plants, but maybe less gas, because they're only running few weeks in winter. And we might have demand response, which I think is still an underappreciated source of flexibility in also in the industrial sector in Europe. For the hard to abate sectors, again, it will depend on the sector, but electricity might play a role in some of them, but molecules in others. And for me, the crucial question at the moment, or one that I find most interesting to discuss, is a bit, where will we have the demand for energy then? Because that seems to start to become a question, whether we put essentially the demand where the supply is, whether we have to do all the energy intensive processes where they are currently situated, or whether there are some ways to replace transporting of massive amounts of energy with replacing some by transporting primary materials. Now, where does that leave us? So for the role of gaseous fuel in the energy system resilience. So my take would be that we need in the short term some market-based tools for diversification. So I don't think that strict storage mandates also are really the right tool. I think there are more market-based approaches that leverage all the flexibility that we can have, including demand side, but also storage alternative supply options. The amount and the capacity of gaseous fuels and gaseous infrastructure will be 2 different questions. It's a point that I would like to highlight. So I would believe that the volume of gaseous fuels that we are going to use will decline substantially. But the capacities, the infrastructure that we need for that might stay less constant than some might expect. So we might need more gas-fired power plants for backup. We might need the storage there for wintertime situations. We might need the pipes. So figuring out what the right layout of that is extremely difficult. It will depend on many political decisions. And the question is a bit, how do we get there? And here, it is important that we have discussions as the one today, and the one that we are having will have in the Parliament on the revision of the gas package and others. But I think it's also important that the member states come up with plans and discuss them among each other to see a bit where the direction is going, because otherwise we might end up in a situation that we now build the wrong things, or we don't build the right things that we need, because we all do a wait and see approach. And we see that this winter that not having invested so much in renewables expansion in the past years is falling on our feet, because everybody has been waiting and hoping for others to come in, or not being sure that the market signals are right. So there needs to be there needs essentially be a stronger push. Now, a final point that I want to make is when doing this study, but also doing other studies, what I observe more and more is how little authoritative data is there available on the European level on the energy systems, and how contradicting things are. How Eurostat is not really up to the task, but also others. We don't know very much about demand in different sectors, about the technologies that are currently available, what capacities are there. And we need to discuss about security of supply in an environment where all these data are not available. And I think this is a public good that needs to be provided by somebody. And if we want to conduct a multi-trillion energy transition in Europe, we need to have something like a European Energy Agency to essentially provide us with the necessary authoritative information to be able to do our planning correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georg, for this. There are many questions that percolate through my mind. The first one is going to be whether this is a one-off, and whether this is going to be tested again and again, and why is that? But let's now go to Jakob. And gas systems have been putting in place all new infrastructure, and that may increase the resiliency of the system. Jakob, do you want to give us some of your views, especially the contribution that this new infrastructure that's being put in place, but as well as how does this fit with the Green Deal? Because in increasing gas flows, it also is seen in certain quarters as contradicting the Green Deal. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation and having possibility to have a panelist in this very important and interesting conference. As concerning flows, we need to still underline the issue of demand. So within Poland, we have very specific situation. The estimation of the consumption of the natural gas for 2021 is about 18.5 BCM, but we have done kind of the estimation where we are heading. So we have very specific situation in Poland because the demand for the natural gas will increase, and will increase a lot. So about 2034, we are even expecting to have a consumption about of 37 BCM per year. Why it goes like that? Because we have, let's say, lots of challenges concerning the decarbonization process. We're having two main sectors that are demanding a lot of the investments toward the implementation of natural gas. We have the power generation, which according to 2019 was based on the 51% on the coal production. So that makes as well the high prices of the energy concerning the ETS. But we have the heating sector system, which is about 79% demand of the coal at the moment. So these are the two main sectors where we see the huge demand for the natural gas to come. Of course, within Poland, there is in terms of the Fit for 55 and the energy and the climate European policy, we are aware of the decarbonization process, but we perceive that this process will be mainly based on the natural gas, and these numbers are just confirming that. So our infrastructure and new projects, and especially the new connection that we are finalizing next year with the interconnector with the Denmark to get the resources from Norway, the expansion of the LNG terminal in the Świnoujście, Polish-Slovakia, Polish-Lithuania interconnectors of the crucial importance for us in terms of the flows. But with the respect of the demands that we see, we perceive that there is as well a role for the new LNG terminal to be built in Poland, the FSRU in the Gdańsk Bay. So that means that we have a little bit, let's say, comparing to the European, a more specific situation where the natural gas is of a crucial importance for our economy and for the, of course, in terms of the security of the supplies, which will be done with all those projects which I have mentioned in that moment. So we are having lot of the needs to have the relevant number of the natural gas in Poland. still to come.
Well, thank you very much, Jakub. Let me move on then to Nenumas big news from the CEO of Amber Grid. I think the Secure Gas project is something that you have participated. Also, new pipeline were mentioned by Jakub. Can you give us some of your experiences with this project and what it means for the increased resilience of the energy systems in Europe?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It is really interesting to exchange the thoughts on the natural gas importance, especially in the times like we have now. I think that everybody feels the pressure from the market, evaluating the situation now of the prices, of the security of supply, of the expectations, what will be in the next winter. Are we satisfied with the situation that we have now in European Union in every particular country? So obviously, natural gas is strategically and extremely important energy source, and it shows this situation that we are now in. And yeah, gas is crucial for the energy sector stability. For some countries, like in Poland, it is crucial for strategic issues to solve the main questions about how it will be supplied the energy. So every country, of course, has its own points of interest, and every country has some specifics. Of course, we Lithuania, we are a northern country, and for us it is really necessary to have stable energy, to have a strong economy, to have heat and electricity for the economy and for the households. So we have made some decisions after the strong rise of the natural gas prices in 2008, 2009. So huge changes in Lithuanian heat sector were made during that time. So basically 75% of central heating now is produced from biofuels. And natural gas has lost its part of the market. So it might be some lessons learned also for the other countries, what happens with some inadequate market situation. But nevertheless, natural gas is covering peak demands. So that's why natural gas is very crucial, very important during the coldest periods and in the biggest cities to be supplied. Also, now we have very high electricity prices in the market. So natural gas helps to prevent the rise. Even if we take into account that some power plants that we have here in Lithuania are not very efficient, but they help to prevent and to make a barrier for further increase of electricity prices. Also, take into account that Lithuania consumes around 11 terawatt hours of electricity. We are consuming 25 terawatt hours of natural gas. So, yeah, it's really important for us. We are providing transportation to other countries additionally around 40 terawatt hours. So for us, natural gas sector is very important, and the things that are happening now, they are of course impacting our market and our company in particular. When we are talking about resilience, first of all, we have to take into account the national security and energy security. So diversified routes of supply, it is our main task. So we have, as you probably know, we have constructed a LNG terminal in 2014. So that's why we have alternative route. Now, together with our very great cooperation with gas system, we are approaching to the finish of interconnection between Lithuania and Poland, GIPL. I would say even more, it is interconnection between the energy island of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Finland towards common European gas market. So this infrastructure is very important for us. and I believe it might be also important for Poland in the future to provide natural gas with some quantities also from Lithuania. The other issue, that other aspect that our colleagues touched already, it is underground gas storages. So it's a very interesting observation in here what we have in our region. As you probably know, we have underground gas storage in Latvia. Yeah, in Chukan's underground gas storage, almost around 2 billion cubic meters. It is filled with 80%. So not a bad figure for the days like now. And what do we have in our market at the moment? That's very interesting. Usually the price in Get Baltic trading area, so in Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Finland, was few euros higher than in EEX gas market. What do we have now? In the latest few months, we have prices lower than in the common, in the biggest European markets, from a few euros to up to 10 or even 20 euros per megawatt hour. So it's very interesting to think about that, how the underground gas storages are impacting the market. I'm not talking even about the security of supply, that is also a crucial instrument to be sure that you will have what to supply to your power stations or boiler houses or factories. But also it makes an impact on the economy. So probably that situation with underfilled gas storages, it might give some thoughts about what's going on and why it's going on. So maybe some lessons learned should be also from this situation, as you mentioned before, that nobody knows. Is it one of a kind situation with this pricing, or it will be used very often in the future? So what lessons can we learn? What can we do? How can we prepare for the future, not to be so weak in this case? So for us, natural gas, we are not a very big consumer, but natural gas for our energy system and for our national security is really important. So we're making steps, and together with our partners, I think that we're getting into a better situation year by year. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to Ralph Wessel and your views on how what is the role and how resilient and how versatile is gas and gas infrastructure in dealing with the energy resilience. We heard energy resilience, energy security. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting panel. Now, I represent the manufacturers of gas power plants, so either turbine-based or reciprocating engine-based. So our look, of course, is a bit different than the one of a supplier of gas or being in charge of an energy system in the country. But when looking at the role of gas power generation, I think in the future, I believe it's essential to clarify three things that very often get mixed up. And the first one is really gas power plants do not compete with renewable power generation, but they complement them. This is what we need to keep in mind, and I'm going to say a few words about this afterwards. The second thing, we very often mix the technology of a gas power plant with the fuel that the plant uses at this moment. They are not natural gas power plants. That's important to keep in mind. And the third point was already mentioned by Georg partly, that we need to distinguish properly between investments in capacity and the energy produced or the gas consumed with this capacity. I think that for the future is an important difference. Now, on the first point, I think we all agree that we have to build huge capacities of renewable power generation. and that the target has to be that they cover as much of our growing energy demand as possible. And as gas power plant industry, we do not see the role of the power plants as competing with that. We rather think that our technology can support the growth in renewable energy by ensuring that resilience and backing them up, those renewables, and by helping maybe also to allow a very fast first decarbonization step. And when you look at the different applications, you have probably three typical ones. The one that is often discussed is the coal to gas switch for baseload generation. And honestly, I don't think this has a long-term perspective, because that's what we want to do with renewables. But as an interim step to get quickly rid of coal capacity until the renewables have been growing in the necessary speed, there, I think there's a role to play. This emission reduction is important, and it doesn't lead to any carbon lock-in. We'll come back to that. Now, the second point is cogeneration. I think especially in the Central and Eastern European countries, you have a lot of cogeneration for district heating purposes. And whenever you have a functioning heat grid, then it makes sense also in the longer term in support of heat pumps that combined heat and power, so cogeneration plants with a very high efficiency, play a role and continue to play a role. But the third then is really the resilience solution, because these plants are able to deliver reliable and dispatchable. So whenever you needed energy, and that in unlimited quantities, so also able to cover a gap of several days, this residual load that is also covered in the study that was presented this morning. Now, the second point that I mentioned in the beginning, the gas power plants can run with climate neutral gases. Already today, you have them running with biogas. And of course, most of them run with natural gas at this moment, but they can operate with hydrogen of any color. And there is no carbon lock-in if you build a gas plant today in a way that it can switch whenever there's sufficient climate neutral gas available to this clean gas. We are building our technology already prepared for the use with hydrogen. But now, of course, unfortunately, the amounts of hydrogen are still very limited for some years. So the customers normally will start the operation with natural gas, but we prepare them that it's easy to switch at a later moment at low costs, and I can say a few words afterwards if somebody's interested, to hydrogen operation. And the last point, this difference between capacity and generation. Now, in the longer term, the value of a gas power plant is not in generating an additional kilowatt hour of electricity. The value is, because the renewables will always be cheaper. The value is ensuring the reliable, flexible energy that can be used when needed and as long as needed. It's a bit like an insurance. You sign a contract and pay for the insurance, and that you hope you will never need it. But when you need it, you want it to be sure that it's there and it covers the full damage. And in this case, it's the full gap. So, and that may be high and it may be long, that gap. And that should be mirrored by the price we're willing to pay for gas power generation and other similar solutions. And we need to compare gas power generation with these other solutions like battery storage or demand response. But it's important to have sufficient backup capacity, whatever it is. because with growing renewables, more will need to be backed up. And on the other hand, we want to use it as little as possible. And if you look at, and I think that's kind of already leading to my colleague that will follow next, there was recently a very interesting study by Agora Energiewende for a climate neutral Germany in 2045. And their conclusion on gas power plants was that Germany would need 40 gigawatt of new capacity. So a huge amount. And they say that building that capacity is comparably cheap. Using it afterwards later with hydrogen would be very expensive. But to have that insurance by building that capacity, there they came to the conclusion that it's cheaper and more adequate than a lot of the other flexibility solutions that they have also evaluated. And I think here I would stop. Happy to come back, especially on the hydrogen readiness, if somebody's interested.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ralph. Genevieve.
Yes.
Well, look, you're the last on the list, and your boss just got appointed to a fairly august job in Germany, so you better make sure when you're going to follow up and say, because he's probably listening. But in general, you seem to be more on the gas. Agora has been quoted on gas, but you seem to be quite hung up on hydrogen. You seem to like hydrogen. I think this is what my notes tell me. I'm not going to tell you what they say about you, but they say that you like hydrogen. But in the end, there is a resilience also with hydrogen. How much is hydrogen to be used for energy? There are people making the case that hydrogen should only be used for hard to abate industries. So how do you see this? I mean, we may be opening ourselves to reliability problem on hydrogen as well.
Yes, certainly. So you touched upon several things there. One of the things that we at Agora try to do is we try to find out what is the role of hydrogen in a future energy system. And of course, hydrogen is proposed as this multi-sectoral tool that it spans different sectors and it is an energy integrator. However, it does certain jobs better than it does others, and we believe that there are certain no-regret applications where it makes sense to fund hydrogen because there is still quite a significant cost gap with respect to fossil alternatives. So when you have this issue of you have this technology that sounds promising for a number of different uses, you want to direct the subsidies in a place where they make most sense, where you get the most bang for your buck in terms of making taxpayers happy and all of this shebang. But because of this, we've identified a number of no-regret sectors for hydrogen uses, and these sectors, in essence, are inescapable sources of hydrogen demand in the future. And this is industrial applications in steel and in the chemical industry. This is transport application, particularly long-haul aviation and shipping. And now we're getting to the one we've just been debating, firm power backup for renewable resources in an integrated power system. So of course, what we've seen now is that the renewable system is not dominant yet in Europe, but it soon will be. And we're seeing the role of gas as renewable backup being really important for this energy security. And as Ralph mentioned, gas generation infrastructure could play a role conceivably in the future in providing this firm capacity, and this gas infrastructure could be also potentially used for hydrogen. Now, I'm concerned about two things in this story. And one of them is this idea of hydrogen readiness, and I hope that Ralph can elaborate a little bit on that, because to me, it is not clear how we're going to go from a massive gas-based system that was designed for gas to a massive renewable hydrogen-based system. And the second thing I'm worried about is the security of supply. And the reason why I'm saying this, and you alluded to it, right? When you said, well, if we're going to use hydrogen in all these different uses, where are we going to get this hydrogen from? And is hydrogen in industry or is hydrogen in transport not going to cannibalize the hydrogen for the power that's essential for firming up this power sector? And on this note, I just would like to say that what is crucial, and this is also, I'm glad that, again, Ralph, you mentioned this climate neutral Germany study 45, because what is crucial in order to ensure this resilience, that essentially three things are essential. One, a mass ramp of renewable capacity to make green hydrogen. Number two is vast amounts of new storage, particularly geological storage, and particularly, even to be more precise, salt caverns, which have a high cycling rate and high capacity. The story of storage was mentioned by previous panelists, but it is in fact even more important if you're trying to design a renewable hydrogen-based system. And finally, we should look past green hydrogen. And I'm not even talking about blue hydrogen here. No, what I feel is missing from the conversation is the waste story and becoming more circular, because a lot of our waste products, whether that's organic products, whether that's plastics or any other waste products, can be turned into hydrogen. And these sources are not seasonal. They can provide hydrogen throughout the year and provide this sort of steady backup to our renewables-led system. Thank you.
All right, so we've done the tour and heard views about the role of gaseous fuels in energy system resilience, and I think most people have focused more on the Central Eastern European theater of operations, but connecting it then to the wider European market. Jörg, let me turn back to you for a moment, if I can. And gas, it's important, or seemed to be important to quite a few people as a transition source of energy and a resilient sense of energy. That's kind of what I've heard here. I also remember my former boss, whose environmental credentials were impeccable since he led the '92 Rio conference, who always talked about gas being a transition energy source. And yet we see gas getting a bad name. There's no doubt about it, that in Europe it's a struggle in many cases to do that. I mean, look at taxonomy. There's some very serious battles going on. So how do you figure this one out? I mean, is this something that people simply don't get, the fact that you need for the resilience of the system, or is the climate change, if you want, angle trumping energy security at this point? Or is there a contradiction? Can you actually do it?
Yes, thanks, Andre. No, I think it comes back to an issue we have a bit discussed in the panel before, this kind of question whether we are talking about volumes of gas or whether we are talking capacity of infrastructure. And so resilience for me is about the capacity of infrastructure that we have available in order to back up the largely the power system. And we will have significant flexibility needs in the system because in summer all the solar panels will run, and hopefully wind is relatively random, so we will have a lot of electricity in summer. And just kind of have a look into the German coalition treaty. Germany is heading for 80% renewables generation by 2030. I mean, that is massive numbers. But then the question is, in winter, when there is little sun and there is the demand for electricity now, in addition coming also for heating, that there must be a certain gap, and we need to somehow fill this gap. And here, as I mentioned, there are different solutions that are being proposed, and the answer will most likely be a combination of different solutions. But one of the solutions might be, and currently seems to be not implausible, is to store some molecules, energy molecules that you can then use in winter when you need them to heat your homes and keep the economy running. So I think we should not mix the two things. I think we will need less gas imports. We will need significantly less gas imports relatively quickly, and we already had this downward trend. On top of that, we have energy efficiency kicking in. So less gas, but potentially the same amount or more infrastructure. And on this infrastructure side, we are still uncertain. And I think that's what the big also discussions need to be about, because the different industries need to understand what their role on this infrastructure side is going to be. I mean, if you can convince industry to stop producing for 2 weeks in winter fertilizers, then we will have already saved quite a bit of energy. And if you can convince the paper mills also to do so, then they run 50 weeks per year, and 2 weeks they do not run, and you have a significant flexibility contribution. But we don't know whether this is feasible. So here there is still this big game on the seasonal flexibility is still out, and that's what will decide the role of molecule infrastructure in Europe in the long term.
That's clear. I'm a power person in the end, so I understand the difference between power and energy. But there are, you can certainly define resilience as ensuring the resilience, the stability of the system. But there are regions in Europe that are still in a much different transition situation. Not everybody is simply dependent of having capacity that is coming from gas. There are people who simply are transferring from coal to other sources of energy. Now you can say, well, let them eat cake, let them go directly into renewable, but that may or may not be realistic. I mean, what do you think?
Well, so the backbone of a hydrogen system, and I'm not talking about the hydrogen backbone as defined by Gas for Climate, but the way to think about hydrogen and the way to think about hydrogen's contribution in improving their resilience, in reducing the need for imports, and improving domestic capacities, but also ensuring the adequate power supply, is to think about it as an extension of a renewables-based system. So hydrogen is crucial, but is secondary to renewables-led electrification. So in that sense, sort of leapfrogging coal to renewables makes sense, but then I would advise to have a plan ready to supplement that with hydrogen when you're trying to go, or actually, you can even do it from the get-go. The mistake would be to do hydrogen before you do renewables.
But let me come to another question, and that comes from the audience, and it talks about the fact that offshore wind generation is seen as being more stable. Can it have an increasing role in the stability of the system as opposed to the onshore? To what extent can it contribute to the resilience of the power sector? I think most of you are gas people, let's put it this way, or hydrogen people, but nevertheless, I mean, we're looking at the whole energy system, and there are different wedges, if you want to put it that way, and certainly onshore, offshore, has a role to play in the stability and the resilience of the system. Anyone wants to pick up on this this issue?
Well, maybe I can. Oh, sorry, Georg?
Go ahead. Well, Georg, you go ahead first, and then we'll come to you.
Okay. No, but I think in terms of volumes of renewables, the question is currently how much can we get out? I mean, if you see the German discussion and the 80%, it essentially means that all the spaces available for renewable production should be exploited, and that's then about the volume. So it's about the energy, and on the flexibility side, I'm less concerned about offshore versus onshore. My feeling is that the short-term flexibility issue is not such a big issue. I mean, in the short-term flexibility, you can provide that with even with batteries and things. So I think for offshore versus onshore, I wouldn't think that in the modeling, these massive storage amounts are really the big determining factor. Would rather see it as a volume than as a capacity question.
You know,
Yeah, so to be honest, Georg explained it pretty well. I agree with everything what he just said. He made the same points that I wanted.
well, that's a short answer. It doesn't give me too many wedges, but let me ask a question, because we had this discussion also about what's happening right now, and the rush out of, you have a system resilient and a system cost and system price. All these are coming into play right now. But we're in a situation of this transition where everybody, basically what you're doing, you're shedding a lot of assets and you're rushing into gas. Everybody's rushing into gas. It's not Europe only, but a lot of people in the Far East, if you want to call it the Far East, and other parts of the world. So is this playing also a role in the resilience of the system? Because, I mean, that may play a role in the resilience of the gas supply, because we're looking at the contribution of the gas to this whole equation. It's about the availability, it's about the transmission, it's about the storage. But there is, okay, so the Gazprom is being the bad guys, but is there a bigger problem that Gazprom being the bad guys this winter? Not a popular question maybe, but nevertheless, I think it's a real question, because our analysis shows that there's enormous amount of, everybody's rushing into gas. So is there, this is something a one-off, or this is something that is going to happen again? Anyone wants to pick this one up? Go ahead.
Yeah,
you seem to be courageous today.
Well, so, there is, it's a fact that gas producers are more regionally and geographically, well, yes, more geographically concentrated. There are fewer gas producers. In contrast, any country can produce renewable hydrogen. So I definitely see a potential of today's market conditions repeating themselves in the future, especially since the European Union, and not just the European Union, but many countries are pushing the narrative that gas is only a transition fuel, ultimately is not the goal. So we're seeing less investments in the supply, and that leaves a lot more power to the producers, to the major producers. In contrast, green hydrogen can be produced anywhere, can be imported in a myriad of ways. It can be produced locally within Europe. So the way to jump off this gas bandwagon is to, frankly, invest in more renewable hydrogen capacities.
Jakob.
Thank you very much. So I will, let's say, try to get the reflection to both sides. As a security of the supply, this is why we are building this new connection, interconnectors, where we have the expansion of LNG terminal, new one to come. So this is to secure the supplies to Poland and to the CEE region. This is as a first. So from the October next year, when the Baltic pipe will be there, we will be fully secured as a Poland. This is also very important in that respect. Secondly, as concerning the energy transition, switch from coal to renewables won't be, let's say, on the cost-effective manner. So this is why we see, and this is what I was mentioning in Poland concerning the capacity of the natural gas and the consumption of the natural gas in the various of the, let's say, industries and the places. So we see it as a switch from coal to gas to hydrogen. So nobody is saying that we are absolutely against the hydrogen, but the way to get there, it will take much more time that, let's say, policymakers would like us to be there. As concerning the hydrogen and its production, we have to underline that it's not only the green hydrogen. There is a possibility for blue and others to come. So as well those sources of the natural gas to come and the additional capacities that we will have, we could use them in the next decades as a source of the, for example, blue hydrogen. So we have lots of different options to come, but what is of the crucial importance, we need to have the full market, or at least the market functioning, and then we can have additional plans. There was one of the speakers mentioned about European hydrogen backbone, where the gas system is as well part of. So we have a vision how the supplies of the hydrogen and what could happen in terms of the flows of the hydrogen. But in terms of Poland, we will have, let's say, both systems. So we will have the flows of additional natural gas to come, but as well simultaneously we need to build the system that will enable us to transport and transmit the numbers of the hydrogen. So I would say that there is a possibility to work together of the all of these options in order to fulfill the decarbonization process.
Georg, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, if I may, just a question, because that was very interesting. So you would expect that in Poland, hydrogen is being consumed for heating and for electricity production in the future?
Jakob, I think that it's definitely not to me. I think that's more to you, probably.
Yeah. I would say that within the Poland, what we have defined at the moment, that we will have hydrogen dedicated industry valleys. So where the places where the energy intensive industries are mainly based. So these are the places where both the lots of the flows and additional capacities of natural gas will come, but simultaneously the demands of the hydrogen will happen. So I would say the hydrogen valleys, these are going to be the main places where the capacities of the hydrogen will happen. What kind of, let's say, industries? I would say there is no one single solution, whether that is going to be power generation or heat. It's rather those who will be interested and would like to have these capacities of the hydrogen, we will just need to serve them those. So there is no, let's say, any single sector that I can say it's willing to have the hydrogen. I would say there are different solutions and different options for different sectors.
I think, Rolf, you were kind of nodding that you wanted the floor. Go ahead, please. On the same topic, or you're moving ahead another direction?
No, I would pick up on the same topic, because really there's a very emotional discussion always saying hydrogen is a scarce resource and it should go to what's always called the hard to decarbonize sectors. And when people define them, they're mainly talking about some industrial applications and some selected transport applications. You will not normally hear that power generation or heat is mentioned among them. I think that's a wrong approach. And the usual argument then that is being used is, look, the value for a steel plant is higher. They can pay a higher price for the hydrogen. You can't afford even natural gas for producing electricity. How would you ever afford using hydrogen? I think this misses the topic, because it's a question of the alternative that you have. And I think we will see, and again, sorry for making reference to the Agora studies. If you look into that study on Germany, you can see that in 2040 or 2045, the biggest share of hydrogen in Germany, according to their scenario, goes into power generation. In fact, it doesn't go into industry, it goes into power generation. Now, what I think is important, connecting to your comments on the hydrogen valleys, I think what's really important is an integrated energy system planning. And that's a nice word that we very often use, but it has to be done properly, putting the grid planning for gas and hydrogen next to the one for electricity and next to the heat grids. And then consider very properly how you get the best infrastructure out of it. And that has to be modeled quite detailed down to a granular level. It's not enough to say in Europe, well, Poland is one connection point. That doesn't work like that. So I think, and then we will see where we need to have the hydrogen pipelines, where we need to repurpose gas infrastructure to hydrogen infrastructure. But that needs to be done now, unfortunately. So we can't wait until 2040 or 2045 when we say now we need the hydrogen for the power plants. It needs to be planned now, the infrastructure.
Nenumas, you've been quiet, and I think my role as a moderator is to give you the last word, because I think we are almost there, but I'd like to give you the opportunity because the others have been more vocal.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, colleagues have things to say, and most of the things I could agree, especially about when we are talking about the hydrogen. What do we see, and what have we seen in our other developments of renewable energy? It will take time. It will take some time. Nevertheless, we have to start doing some things to check the value chains right now. So yes, of course, to produce quite substantial amounts of hydrogen, we have to have investments in offshore wind, for example, or enormous sun panel fields. But nevertheless, we should try to build, first of all, 1, 2, 3 megawatts of production of green hydrogen, and then to put it into the common gas transmission system. And we should look what happens then, because we have the necessity for green hydrogen throughout the Europe, especially in some companies. They are purchasing certificates of origin. So that is the system that we have to we have to assure. So first of all, before starting refurbishing the current transmission systems, because it will be difficult, I mean, in next 2-3 years to start investments that nobody can imagine what about the rate of the return. And also support schemes, I'm sure will not be in the place before 2020, probably for 25. So we will follow. I think the simple logic that we will start from small things, and then we will go to the bigger things. Of course, those oversupply, overcapacity of production of electricity, if it happens somewhere, so it will boost the production of green hydrogen. I see green hydrogen as the biggest value, looking at those carbon taxation issues and so on. So there is a big opportunities for our countries also, because we have some spare land, we have some spare possibilities to produce more energy and to convert it into the hydrogen. And we will see. I think that it will develop step by step. It will not be like a nuclear bomb, but it will take some time. But we have to start acting, I think, immediately in a year or two. But starting from small steps. That's our idea.
Very well. Listen, thank you all very much. I think this is a fascinating conversation because it is not a topic that is unimportant, and it's not a topic that is not, if you want, does not raise a lot of strong debates and strong feelings. The role of gas, I think, is becoming quite clear that it is an important transition fuel, but also more important capacity for future resilience of the system. I will stop now and pass it on to the host, and thank you all to the panelists and the opportunity to moderate this.
Thank you, Andrei, very much. Thank you, panelists. This brings us closer to the end of today's conference. For the final words, please let me switch to Warsaw again, where Mr. Leszek Jesień should be already with us. Do we have connection with Warsaw? Leszek Jesień.
Yes,
Chairman of the Board of Directors of Central Europe Energy Partners. The floor is yours, Leszek.
I think I'm seen and I heard. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Good, thank you. Just a few words. First, warm words of gratitude for this extremely interesting conversation on electricity, gas, and the resilience of our systems. If I can try to draw a couple of conclusions, then I'm tempted to say that the resilience is clearly a challenge that could be seen from probably all of the presentations in interventions. And my sum up would go as follows, that the first remark is that the more renewables we have, it seems that the more natural gas we'll have at this stage of technology and energy affairs as we stand now. And it means that we will be more, not less, dependent on the external suppliers, including the bad guys that was mentioned in the last panel. So that is, to me, less resilient path rather than more resilient one, at least in the immediate future, including immediate months, which is quite worrying. My second remark would go on a more general note that we seem to go along on this energy transition trying to micromanage things, micromanage the subsidies for renewables, for the other technologies, for storage, for hydrogen. There are now price caps because there are price hikes. And then that is a contrary to what our instincts, I think, should tell us, that the more markets, it's safer and more resilient than the less markets. Because the vast imagination of our compatriots and technology inventors is something that will save us all, probably, ultimately. So I think this is something that we should look at when we call for things that we need and more of a system planning. In principle, yes, but in reality, we have to leave elements of free market to work our well-being. The third note of mine would be that optimistically, it has been called that the nuclear power generation has been in a renaissance period, and the mood is changing, as Alain Tassonet called. That is a good point from the resilient point of view, because it's a stable generation that is not dependent on the weather conditions. The fourth remark from my side would be the following, that we need probably a rethink of the market design, specifically for electricity, which is the driving part of the market as they are. But behind the electricity, there is always the other markets on fuels, of course. And that came to me from the obvious remark from Jerzy Buzek, that the costs for renewables fell dramatically over the course of last years and decades, while the cost of the nuclear power generation has been rising. That is, of course, true remark if we take the price of the electricity as the single commodity that is being priced, as it is today in Europe. That is why the notions of inertia, the notions of the other aspects, the capacity, that is everything that has led to a call from Eric Kłosowski, my boss, for a multi-commodity market, perhaps. A market that would combine our needs for various elements in the energy sector. My fifth remark would call for a certain cautious remark to our hopes for hydrogen development. I'm all in a keen interest to see whether we will be able to develop the vast amounts of generation, as it was called, for producing hydrogen, and then vast amounts of storage to store this hydrogen in massive scale across the continent. But this is something to be seen. It's something that we have never really attempted. And it is not the first time that humanity, and especially in Europe, we are trying to do something with hydrogen. And that is to be seen whether we will be able to keep this leadership. I mean, Kadri Simson, the Commissioner, and Professor Jerzy Buzek, they both called for continued leadership from the European Union in this energy transition. That is very right. But of course, as any leader in competition and technology development is aware, the leaders are prone to make mistakes. Now, as I happen to work on a daily basis for the Polish transmission system operator, that I'm acutely aware that we need to deliver electricity at each and every second of time, which means that we need electricity at each and every second of time in order to supply our customers. That is something that is done on the electricity produced, not on the electricity promised to be produced. And finally, I was very happy to hear the final words from the Muras big news from our colleagues from Ambergrid, who said that things will be done in a way of step by step. That is a very pragmatic approach. I think in this area of technology dreams that we have, this practical approach is very much needed for the resilience of our energy systems. I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the participation and for this day. It was very fruitful for me, and I hope it was for you. So have a good weekend. Thank you very much. Bye.